This house was completed around the beginning of 1812, and it was instrumental during the War of 1812.
Doors Open Whitby connects people to places, stories, and is part of a provincial initiative. We've learned about the growth of our town, our urban and rural spaces, the remarkable individuals who have been part of that journey, and about the waves of immigration and innovation that have followed. Connecting our community to the places that we value has been harder in the COVID-19 world of 2020. Thankfully, like many other communities in Ontario, Doors Open Whitby is going digital, so that we'll still have the opportunity to learn and explore, to be inspired and challenged as we look to the future, to cherish what is right here in our own backyard, and to acknowledge how we got here, to rediscover Whitby. We begin this story by acknowledging that it takes place on the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nation of the Mississauga Nation. May we respectfully share in the responsibility of the stewardship and environmental protection of these ancestral lands. We recognise that we still have a lot to learn about the people who lived on this land for thousands of years before the first settlers arrived.
Welcome to Lindhouse Museum. Lindhouse is the oldest house in Durham region. The house has been moved twice. The original location was where the Queen's Common Plaza is now at Dundas and McQuay. In 1986, the house was moved to Cullen Gardens, St. Taunton, and in 2013, it's moved to its current location here at 900 Brock Street South. It's operated as a museum by the Whitby Historical Society. We have lots of fun events here. We have festivals, we have workshops, and of course, right now, a lot of our events are online. When the Lind family moved here, there was really nothing but forest, and they helped to build Highway 2, which runs from Toronto to Kingston. This house was completed around the beginning of 1812, and it was instrumental during the War of 1812 as an inn and a tavern for the soldiers who were traveling through. General Brock himself stayed here. In fact, there's a fun story where he came in and he asked Jabez Lind for a horse to get to York because he had to carry an important message during the war. They actually went together and made the fastest journey on record on horseback from Whitby to Toronto. That was in 3 hours and 5 minutes. When the house was moved from its original location to Cullen Gardens, it actually looked a bit different on the outside. It was covered in stucco and painted blue. The surprise was when they removed the stucco, the original wood siding was perfectly preserved underneath. So all it needed was a fresh coat of paint. 1 or 2 pieces were replaced. Basically, the siding that you see on the house is the original siding from 1812. When you come to visit the house and you're in the parlor, you will see the beautiful stenciling on the walls. Behind a frame, you'll actually see the original stencil work that Clarissa Lind painted in her house. When the house was being restored and the wallpaper was removed from the walls, they actually found the original stenciling underneath all the wallpaper. So an artist came in and she restored the stenciling back by hand the way it was originally. She even copied any of the little mistakes that Clarissa made. In the backyard of the Lind house, we have a heritage garden where we grow items that Mrs. Lind herself would have grown to feed her family. And when you visit the kitchen, you'll see the preserves in jars. Those came from our garden. Upstairs, you will see the bedrooms, and the beds are actually the rope beds. In rope beds, the mattresses were held up by ropes, and the saying, "good night, sleep tight," actually came from the fact that you had to tighten those ropes so that the bed did not sag in the middle. And you'll learn a lot of interesting connections from history to our present day when you come on a tour. In the girls' room, there is a portrait of Clarissa Lind, the eldest daughter. Clarissa is actually one of Whitby's first historians. Clarissa lived from 1805 to 1900, so she lived to be 95 years old, and she saw a lot of the history of Whitby. She remembered when General Brock came here, she remembered the war, she lived through Confederation, and it's amazing that Clarissa lived to be 95 years old because she gave birth to 17 children. At the front door, you will actually see some of the artifacts that were discovered when the house was being restored. There is a little shoe, which was found up in the attic. There's actually a family story related to that shoe. Two of the grandkids were playing in the attic, probably around the 1840s. The brother took his sister's shoe, threw it in the corner of the attic, and nobody in the family could ever find this shoe. 150 years later, during the restoration of the house, there was the shoe underneath one of the floorboards in the attic. The Huis bell is on display. That actually belonged to the butcher in Whitby who would travel around with his meat wagon selling meat door to door. And the bell is under a glass dome because the story is that there is a curse on the bell and only Huis family members are allowed to touch it. We actually had some of the Huis family come visit and we opened the bell and they had a bell ringing, so that was a lot of fun. Other than that, it's displayed under the dome to protect anybody from the curse. So the Prince of Wales suite actually originally was in John Ham Perry's house. It was specially imported for the Prince of Wales visit in 1860. He was going to visit with the Perry family and they imported this furniture just for his visit. Everybody went down to the train station with me to greet the prince and they were waiting on the train and they waited and they waited and they waited and the train was very late. So when the prince finally arrived in town, he said, "Thank you very much for this lovely welcome. Goodbye, I have to carry on my trip." In the 1860s, the Rainer Piano Factory was one of the major industries in the area. Elmina Lind owned a Rainer piano, not this particular one, but she owned one very much like this. This particular piano was actually the showpiece for the factory, and it was sent to various fairs around Ontario and Quebec. You'll see the beautiful mother of pearl inlay and the hand-carved music stand. I love this music stand because it has a wonderful display of Canadiana. Lots of interesting pieces that he decided to carve into it. So this is a really special piece of Whitby history. One of the rooms upstairs used to be a bedroom, is now our special exhibit room, and that has rotating displays. Currently, the display is pieces of our past. It features a lot of interesting pieces of the Whitby Historical Society collection of artifacts, which are not commonly on display. They might be from a little bit later in time than the house, but they're interesting pieces of Whitby's past. In the display room, you'll see a lovely oil painting on velvet by Mary Maria Lind. So Mary Maria was a grandchild of the Lind family, and she had a bit of a different life to the usual young lady of the 1800s. She was sent to boarding school in Quebec, so she came back to Whitby bilingual. She went to Ontario Ladies College, which was one of the first colleges for women, and that's where she studied art. And that's where she painted this painting. Next door to the museum is the Warren General Store, which is our gift shop and visitor center. In fact, that's where you start your tours when you come to visit us. We carry works from local artists, crafters, authors. The original Warren General Store was run by the Linds' two son-in-laws, and they opened the first store in Whitby. It was the first store between Toronto and Port Hope at the time. The store also acted as the town post office. The original store location was in Hamer's Corners, which is in the Dundas and Anderson area. That's long gone, so our store gift shop next door is named in honor of the original Warren General Store. And while I love to talk about Lind House, I much prefer to even show it to you in person. So I really do invite you to visit and have a walk through and imagine what it was like. Children rushing through the halls, soldiers walking in and out, visiting, bringing messages, all the grandchildren who grew up here, the history and the wonderful life that they had here in Whitby.
From historical sites to modern marvels of construction, Digital Doors Open features virtual tours and online activities so that you can take a journey across Whitby and the province to discover the buildings, natural spaces, infrastructure and cultural landscapes that shape and define our communities and tell our stories. To learn more about this project, visit whitby.ca/doorsopen. Visit doorsopenontario.on.ca, where you will find more to discover from Whitby and beyond.